Welcome to our Yukon adventure. We'll share our 9-day itinerary and the best tips we learned on our trip to the Yukon. We are Michael and Clara, and for our honeymoon, we wanted a challenge. Instead of white sand beaches and all-inclusive resorts, we wanted wilderness and adventure. And we found that in the Yukon. This video is mostly for our memories, but we love the Yukon so much, we thought perhaps this video could help you plan a trip yourself. So, here we go. Welcome to the Yukon. We rented an overlanding Jeep from Overland Yukon, and they picked us up at the airport, making this super easy. Don't miss the Yukon Visitor Center for maps and road closure information. Super important. Miles Canyon was our first stop. Intense rapids used to flow here before a dam was built, and the frothing white water looked like the manes of galloping white horses, and that's how Whitehorse got its name. Now, navigating through the canyon played a really big role in opening the north for exploration and gold prospecting, so it's an important part of history you should check out. Next up, Emerald Lake. Just a quick photo stop. Beautiful colors here, but we were behind schedule, so onward to Carcross Desert. We expected to snap a photo here and run, but we ended up staying longer than that. The hike to the top of the dune is definitely worth the incredible views, so leave yourself time for that and don't skip this place like most people. In the morning, we folded up our tent for the first time, and we doubled back to Carcross village to get some breakfast. In Carcross, you'll learn a lot about the indigenous groups that have lived in this area for thousands of years. You can check out some indigenous art and shop at some indigenous craft stores as well. Now, there's also a stop in Carcross for the White Pass Railway, a scenic railway route which goes to Skagway, and we definitely would have considered this had it not been closed because of COVID. The Matthew Watson store has been open for over 100 years, and it has some of the best souvenirs in the Yukon. This tiny post office is the longest continuously open post office in Canada, so kind of fun to check out. Pick up some stamps for the postcards you probably bought at the Matthew Watson store. We pushed on because it was still a bit of a drive to get to Skagway. Now, on the way to Skagway, you'll pull over for photos more times than you can count. The views on the Klondike Highway are incredible. Budget some time for that. We didn't, and it left us in a little bit of a time crunch. The Yukon Suspension Bridge is on the way south to Skagway. Now, this is actually in BC, but just ignore that. Here, you'll learn a lot about what it was like to be a gold prospector, Yukon geology, and different animal life across the area. Now, as you're driving around the Yukon, if you take the time to stop and read the signs, you're going to learn a lot about this guy, Scootin' Jim. He's one of the 4 people who originally discovered gold and kicked off the Yukon Gold Rush. Fascinating bit of history we wish we knew a little bit more about before we went. We've put some links in the description so that you can check those out and be informed before you go. There's one other important bit of Yukon history we think you should read about, and we'll talk more about that on the day 9 portion of the video. Fraser, BC was a short rest stop, but this place was so beautiful we stayed a lot longer than we intended to. Not much to do, but just take in the views. Then it was on to International Falls, which is not marked on any map. To find it, look for the avalanche warning signs on the right-hand side of the road, and if you've passed the Alaska sign, you've gone too far. Waterfall over this way. That represents failure right now. We can't make it over there. There's no way down with all this snowpack. We're just a little too early in the season. So, back up to the Jeep.
We found the rope!
From where you'll park, there's a 40-meter descent straight to the creek at the bottom. You'll definitely need to find the ropes to help you get down. In the end, there was no way we could get through that snowpack and the high water line, so we gave up.
Oh, Alaska.
Skagway, Alaska is a major cruise ship port, and the whole city really caters to that type of tourism. We picked up some smoked Alaskan salmon to cook later for dinner, and then headed out to the Dyea Flats. Here, we made a simple dinner by the remains of the Dyea Pier while watching bald eagles fly overhead. Dyea was once a major boom town and the start of the Chilkoot Trail, which was the only way into the north during the gold rush, until the White Pass Railway was built in Skagway. Dyea became a ghost town afterwards, and now you can explore the old roads and laneways. It's incredible to see how quickly nature has reclaimed this place and erased what was once a busy and important port. On day 3, we'll spend the morning back in Skagway, where we'll grab breakfast and do some shopping for camping supplies and lunch before boarding the ferry to Haines, Alaska. The gentleman from Overland, Yukon, told us that the drive from Haines, Alaska to Haines Junction is one of the best in the north, and after the Klondike Highway yesterday, we were eager to see what he meant, and it didn't disappoint. This drive is part of what's called the Golden Circle, a common road trip route that we'll leave some information for in the description below. Views like this always make me wish I was a better photographer. We planned to camp at Kathleen Lake in Kluane National Park, but we stopped for photos too many times, and when we finally arrived, all the campsites were already full. This is common at Kluane on weekends, so plan a backup campsite. We started this hike just outside of Kluane Park at 10:30 p.m., but there's still plenty of sunlight for exploring. It's very easy to lose track of time in the land of the midnight sun. Day 4 is scheduled to be our longest driving day, from Tahini River to Dawson City, but for some reason, we're not in a rush. We spent the morning making breakfast at camp and watching this canoe school set off on what looked like to be an epic day on the water. One of the must-do stops on this trip north is Breaburn to pick up one of the world's largest cinnamon buns. No idea if that's a real thing, just something they say, but this thing was almost the size of our Jeep's hubcaps, and honestly, it lasted us for days. You have to try it. Also all along the highway are lots of historical stops you can make to learn all about Yukon history, geology, the impact of wildfires, the list goes on. Just make sure you keep an eye out for wildlife too. Like this family of adorable foxes we ran into playing in the middle of the road just outside of Dawson City. Dawson City is like stepping back in time. We arrived late and went straight to Diamond Tooth Gertie's. Here, there are 3 shows per night, each themed after the gold rush. Each gets better than the one before, so you shouldn't miss any of them. We stayed at the Yukon River Campground, just across the river. There's a short ferry trip, it's free, and it runs 24/7. We wish we had budgeted a whole day to spend in Dawson City, but we only had the morning, so we kind of rushed this. Don't do that. If we had time, we would have done the prospecting tour, the downtown walking tour, and visited Dredge No. 4 National Historic Site. Instead, we missed these really important historic sites. This is the beginning of Canada's highest highway, the famous Dempster. It's the only road to the Arctic Circle and Beaufort Sea. Now the Dempster is remote, and this notice at the start warns there are no emergency medical services anywhere on the Dempster, so you need to drive with care and you need to be prepared. You cross a single lane narrow bridge over the Klondike River, and then you're on your way up the Dempster to Tombstone Park, the Northwest Territories, the Arctic Circle, and the Beaufort Sea. Our goal was the Arctic Circle sign, but speaking with travelers at the Tombstone Visitor Center, we were warned that the road north was still hazardous and many people were turning back. We decided not to risk it and spend more time in Tombstone instead. We didn't regret that. First, we did the Surfbird mountain hike. It's unmarked, but just park at the radio tower at the base. Hike along the creek until you reach 2 willow trees. Turn left in between the 2 willow trees and hike to the nearest peak. No joke. Those are the directions we got at the visitor center. It was June and crossing the snowpack was still hazardous, and I forgot mittens, but these wool socks filled in a pinch.
Love how smushy the ground is. Just love it. Oh, like that one?
Very tempted to just slide down this
Michael.
gully here. What? Golden Sides hike was closed, but from the parking lot there are amazing views towards the Tombstone mountain range. Not to be missed. Waking up on day 6, our only goal was to enjoy the Grizzly Ridge Trail. We were warned that it's a really steep incline, and the peak is at almost 5,000 feet elevation. We stopped often for rest along the way, but the views at the top were worth the effort in the end. This might as well be called the land before time. It's often compared to Patagonia in terms of beauty. Unfortunately, skies were gray and we're not the best photographers, but it's really hard to describe how beautiful this place was. The Five Finger Rapids are a short hike down from the highway viewpoint, and most people stay up there, but this is definitely worth getting up close. It looks a lot different down here than up at the highway lookout, where most people see them from. It's incredible to think that paddle wheel boats used to navigate these waters, taking people and supplies to Dawson City. How many steps, Claire?
159 steps.
159?
Plus 62 at the bottom one.
Plus 62, okay. Because we skipped the Arctic Circle part of our trip, we were ahead of schedule and did a lot less driving on this day than we originally planned for. So we arrived at Fox Lake campsite super early and found a great spot right on the lake to set up for the night. We decided to just take it easy, build a fire, and reminisce about our trip so far. It really felt like things were starting to wind down. There was only one more big hike tomorrow, and then we would be checking into our cabins in Whitehorse for our final 2 days. It was a short drive from Fox Lake Campground to Yukon Horsepacking Adventures, where we booked a short 2-hour ride. Clara has had some training, but you can tell that this is my first time on a horse. After some quick instructions, we were on our way though. Our hosts were fantastic, shared a lot about their life, and we highly recommend this stop. They have short rides like we did or multi-day backcountry adventures, and we'll definitely check that out the next time we visit. After this, we grabbed lunch at Bean North Coffee Roasters. I recommend the Kluane Park Roast personally, and then we did a tour of the Yukon Wildlife Preserve. This is a great park and service that rehabilitates animals injured in the Yukon and British Columbia. The goal is to reintroduce them into the wild, or in the case of this 3-legged lynx that was injured in a car accident, give them a peaceful place to live out the rest of their days. As we mentioned before, we had one more big hike to go, and it started at the Kusawa Lake Campground. But when we arrived, it was closed. Just like International Falls, the Golden Sides Trail, and the second half of the Grizzly Lake Trail, all of them were closed because of record seasonal snowfall that had left too much snowmelt to make the trails safe to cross, even though it was June. Oh well, one more relaxing night with the rooftop tent. We gotta say, the rooftop tent was one of the most comfortable camping experiences we've had. Lots of space, lots of padding, and high above ground for extra wildlife protection. 10 out of 10 for comfort and safety. planned our trip to have 2 relaxing days in Whitehorse at the end. We should have flipped this around, and the reason being, if we had checked out the Beringia Museum, the Transportation Museum, and the MacBride Museum before driving around the Yukon, we would have known a lot more about the local history, geology, and all sorts of information that would have helped put more of the Yukon into context. So we definitely recommend checking out these attractions before starting your road trip. We really fell in love with the Yukon, and we'll be back just as soon as we can. We hope this video inspired you to consider a trip yourself. Let us know in the comments below if it did.